In another module, I introduced several of the global economic factors that are inducing chaos in management decisions today. We examined some of the turbulence that exists in financial, energy, and technology markets. I believe that we can all agree that in the future, greater levels of turbulence and chaos will continue to create management dilemmas for the global leader. In this module, we will explore how leaders collect information and make decisions. I will discuss how the management mindsets of a leader influence the culture of an organization and its ability to resolve and extract information from their environment. We will also examine key leadership characteristics that influence the outcomes of decision-making. From these leadership characteristics, I will introduce a decision-making process that can be used to drive improved outcomes for global businesses. One of the questions we attempt to answer in this module is why smart leaders make dumb decisions. Loebbaka, in speaking to leaders' poor decision-making, said that chances are you're unaware of the limits of your abilities, unappreciative of the challenges that lie ahead, and uninformed of what can go wrong. As we continue, we will look at how leaders view their own and their organization's abilities, how they characterize and prepare for the challenges that will have to be faced, and how they position their enterprises to assure global success. So how do leaders collect knowledge useful in making global business decisions? Let's talk about 3 filters that prevent leaders and organizations from gaining useful knowledge about its global business environment. The surveillance, data, and political filters can prevent global business leaders and organizations from gathering the knowledge they need to make smart and sustainable decisions. First, we'll look at the surveillance filter. The surveillance filter determines where the organization will go to seek information. The breadth of an organization's surveillance filter will be determined by the leaders and organization's thirst for knowledge and curiosity of the outside world. Leaders need to assure themselves that the surveillance filter contains both an inside and outside view from the perspective of their organization. As we learned in the previous module, industry killers typically spring from technology attractors outside your own industry, as was the case with Bloom Energy. The data filter precludes the organization from processing information that may be valuable. If the data gathered through the surveillance filter does not align with historical or accepted norms, the organization may reject this information as incorrect or irrelevant. Global leaders that do not cultivate a culture that seeks out and is open to new ideas will not be prepared to compete in the chaotic global environment in which we find ourselves. The political filter is rooted within the organization's culture and power structure. Critical information on the environment will be rejected if the leaders within the organization feel threatened. This is perhaps the most dangerous condition with respect to the long-term sustainability of the organization's success. Global business leaders must acknowledge the existence of this phenomena as they sort out information processed by regional managers who may be interested in their own agendas and longevity. It is important that leaders understand the flow of information through their global network. Knowledge of the organization's surveillance, data, and political filter points in the organization will help leaders assess the quality of information being presented. Similarly, a leader must have knowledge of the sophistication of both the people and systems collecting and disseminating this information. Global myopia and an inside focus of the organization leads to poor decision-making. Let's identify the pitfalls that exist for global business leaders in gathering information and making decisions. The first pitfall is to identify and focus on one specific problem. In today's highly turbulent and chaotic times, a specific problem will typically be influenced by a vast network of attractors that, if ignored, will reduce or negate the desired outcomes. Global leaders have to identify attractor linkages and work on a problem from a systems or network perspective. The second pitfall is that organizations tend to use data that is close at hand. Convenient data should be challenged for its relevance and timeliness. As discussed previously, information that conforms to the organization's expectations of the outside world may not adequately represent the novel and discontinuous changes occurring outside the organization. The third pitfall is to make decisions based on a very narrow set of inputs and incomplete knowledge. This almost always results in distasteful surprises and undesired outcomes. Global myopia creates a false sense of security and overconfidence in leaders that leads to planning fallacies. Loebbaka identified 3 leadership characteristics that stem from overconfidence: the illusion of superiority, the illusion of optimism, and the illusion of control. Let's examine global leaders and how they can minimize the impact of these illusions. Most successful leaders are driven by a sense of confidence and superiority within themselves and the organization's mission. It is imperative that leaders recognize where reality ends and illusion begins. First, a leader must recognize the gap between what they think can be achieved and what can actually be achieved. This is a difficult task for a leader, as it is their job to continue to set the bar higher for themselves and the organization. Second, one must not dismiss their own or the organization's shortcomings as inconsequential. Third, a leader must seek counsel from those smarter than himself or herself. This issue has become increasingly problematic as CEO hubris has gone unchecked, as evidenced in the previous discussions on the most recent global financial meltdown. The illusion of optimism must also be tempered in the leader of an organization. Commonly, leaders in organizations underestimate the competition and hinge their success on the failure of others. Leaders should also avoid assuming that their success will be based on their willing the desired outcome. No amount of charisma can overcome planning fallacies driven by poor decisions and incomplete information. Leaders must also seek out and listen to the pessimistic views of those who would challenge the organization's direction and decisions. Leaders establish a culture within an organization that either fosters or is intolerant of dissent. It is often the case that these dissenters hold key pieces of information that can be used to refine decisions and influence the success of their outcomes. Managing the illusion of control can provide the higher level of organizational flexibility needed to respond to a changing and chaotic environment. Leaders must acknowledge that there are events that will lie outside of their sphere of control and influence. Adequate surveillance of the environment and rapid dissemination of information throughout the organization is required to detect the attractors that can negatively or even positively influence the outcomes of the organization's mission. One must understand that completely random events will hold sway over the organization and its mission. Natural disasters and 9/11 are examples of completely unpredictable events that can dramatically affect the enterprise. Because of this, it is necessary to recognize that a degree of decision elasticity is required to adapt to these chaotic events. Leaders overcome by the illusion of control often believe their decisions and plans are infallible and stay the course, even as Rome burns around them. So how do global leaders and organizations create decision-making processes consistent with the turbulent and chaotic times in which we live today? The answer to this question is practiced inside many organizations now. The key is developing and deploying a thoughtful, methodical, and statistics-based approach to decision-making and strategic planning. Many organizations have successfully integrated Six Sigma statistic-based approaches to managing their internal processes. applying these same statistic-based approaches to the organization's decision-making process can improve outcomes by identifying deterministic processes and their attractors in a seemingly random and chaotic world. I have merged Mauboussin's decision-making model with the process-based terminology used in the Six Sigma DMAC cycle. These systems-based models can improve an organization's decision-making practices and create a more reliable and sustainable outcome. The first step is to define a reference class of organizations that have faced similar decisions. The reference class chosen must be broad enough to be statistically significant and narrow enough to accurately compare to your decision criteria. For example, one may select organizations that have begun foreign direct investment in Eastern European countries that have recently entered the European Union to compare to your own initiative. Second, inside the reference class of organizations chosen, there must be a measured distribution of both positive and negative outcomes. Look for extreme failures of either success or failures, as these may not have relevancy to the problem at hand and may be influenced by other unknown attractors that may be of interest or random events. Finally, in the second step, the organization should identify the average or expected outcome from the reference class organizations. In the third step, you will analyze the measured reference class's information and make a prediction of your own expected outcome. Based on our previous discussion of our leadership's overconfidence, it is likely your prediction will be optimistic. As one examines the reference class, it is possible to draw inferences between the previous successes and failures in your own predicted outcome. If there were few successes within the reference class, the organization should be prepared to break with tradition and embrace novel solutions. In the fourth step, the organization should study the reference class's past success and failure factors, the attractors that influence them, using this information to improve upon their own plan. Organizations should take care not to overanalyze the reference class's positive outcomes, as this will unnecessarily feed the illusion of optimism. Negative outcomes should be explored in detail to understand the underlying factors and the attractors that influence these failures. This step creates a basis of comparison for your own perceived success factors, potentially preventing avoidable mistakes and building upon your own success factors. In the fifth step, the organization will implement a plan to control its own success factors and create a surveillance plan to monitor them. Leaders and organizations should expect failure among these key success factors, as interaction between outside environment attractors change, creating new turbulence. Aligning the organization's resources to monitor and control tipping points will position the organization for greater success. Organizations fail typically do not see deterioration of key success factors and bring resources to the party too late. In the sixth and final step, the organization must frequently re-envision its plan. As increasing turbulence and continued chaos reign across the globe, it is vital to frequently test the relevance and success factors and the array of attractors acting upon them. This Six Sigma DMAC cycle, which forms the basis of this six-step process, should be followed to maintain the relevance of your success factors and plan. To review this six-step process, first, define a reference class. Second, measure the distribution of their outcomes. Third, analyze and make a prediction of your success. Fourth, improve your success factors based upon the past successes and failures of the reference class. Fifth, control your envisioned success factors. Sixth, and finally, revisit your own plan. To succeed in today's chaotic environment, leaders must create wide knowledge networks, knowing that surveillance, data, and political filters will influence the information they receive. Leaders must maintain a balance of confidence among their own capability and the organizations which they lead. Leaders must promote and cultivate decision elasticity while using statistical processes to guide their decision-making processes and strategic planning. This millennium will be characterized by its global turbulence and the need to synchronize to constant change and chaos. Let's all become great leaders and fantastic decision makers. Thank you.